Welcome in, guys. If you like the episode you're about to watch and want to support us, the free, simple way to do that is to hit like and subscribe. And if you're interested in learning how to play Latin percussion, come check us out at CongaChops.com, where you'll find over 90 hours of courses, lessons, and guest artist masterclasses, all with your free 7-day trial. Now let's get on with the show. This is going to be the inaugural, what could stand to be a very short-lived or a very prolonged multi-episode series from the wonderful folks here at CongaChops. Took the initiative to bring these fools together because I love them so much. And it's really just a privilege and a pleasure to count them as friends and colleagues, and also just to be able to get together a little bit and talk shop. For those of you who aren't familiar, I have with me Marquito Lopez, Marcos Torres Kiglo, I'm Paulo Stañaro.
Mr. Chops.
Yeah.
Mr. CongaChops.
Something like that. And yeah, together we kind of form the structural base of what you'll find at CongaChops.com, which is a really cool resource that we all poured a lot of time into. And yeah, we're just happy to be here to kind of share a little bit of our insights in the industry. So one of the first things that we're going to tackle in terms of what it takes to become a career percussionist, which is super important, right, is sort of how we structure the way we carry ourselves, what we play, how we study, in terms of how we want to approach getting a gig. So the first thing, and I think this goes without saying, but it's super, super important not just to gloss over, is honing our skills. This is something that in the percussion world can sometimes be overlooked outside of like traditional settings or Afrocentric settings, because percussion can be seen as auxiliary, which it can be in a certain role. But I think it's important that we also understand the weight that comes with anytime we express ourselves, anytime we sit down to play, we should at least try to be at the point where we can contribute something meaningful. Umbrella term we decided to call it is like honing your skills. So in this case, we're talking about actually getting good at the instrument that you're going to play when you go to make music with others. As far as honing your skills, Lopez, what's kind of some of the things that you think about broadly that you make sure that you have under your belt?
Putting the time with the instrument, like presenting, like being organized and disciplined with it when you're coming up and starting to learn the instrument with the basics.
Yeah.
Like the basics, like from position, sound.
Yeah.
Like
Time.
Time.
Yeah.
It's like that's for me. That's the most important thing before you play music. So when you start playing with people, that's what you're gonna be comfortable enough to make music.
Absolutely.
And not learning the instrument while you're playing to it. But both should go hand in hand.
Sometimes I feel like we can be in situations where we're, forced to learn on the fly, whether it's like a different genre or a different repertoire.
Good too.
Those are great.
Yeah. It keeps you up, it gives you challenges are good.
Yeah.
It keeps you.
But at the same time, I think what you're saying is that you want to be at a place where making music with others has to do a lot with sort of having our own shit together so that we can listen and, actually make music, as opposed to only worry about, oh shit, am I, playing this right or wrong?
He said it. For me, it can be, if you're not 100% there, learning your parts, the right sounds, getting the right tones for the gig, and always being willing to look for the pocket. Never settle that this is where I'm grooving. Continue to, if you're not already, at a high level, there's a chance that you might think you're in the pocket, but there's always a little bit deeper to go, whether you're playing with the drummer or another percussionist. So being willing to listen to the MD, take the drummers, whoever else is playing with you, take a little bit of their nonverbal cues seriously while you're still getting there. It's fine to not be 100% the best player you could be, but little things like a willingness to be a team player with finding the pocket could go a long way while you're working your way there.
Yeah. Time is definitely something that obviously we reinforce ourselves by studying with a metronome, playing at different tempos, different styles, so that we're comfortable, whether it's playing slow or fast, and all those things become natural. But in a band setting, it's a communal thing. Time and feel isn't just like, this is my, where I feel the time or why. It's a very much a communal thing, especially when we're talking about like percussive instruments, like you mentioned, whether it's in a percussion ensemble or with a kit player.
Rhythm section.
Yeah, for sure. Those things come with experience, starting with your sort of security allows you to sort of be a little bit more open to and sort of just aware of how time feels as an ensemble. Just to kind of touch on some of those things, definitely sound is super important, and that means obviously we can talk about sound for hours on La Tumbadora, or playing timbal, but it also just kind of, that idea bleeds into just being sensitive to the sound that anything you play makes. Whether that's a shaker, whether it's a set of chimes, whether it's a very low drum or something high, sort of having that idea of where it fits frequency-wise, so that when you bring something to the table, whether it's a groove or it's just like a thread that you're just playing, it is in time, first of all, and it sounds good and it doesn't really clash, in a negative way with some of the stuff that's going on. And that bleeds into feel, which is like, again, probably the most
important one. Right?
Yeah, the most important and the most like unique to each person. It's also something that's super like genre specific, song specific. Like you can really get into how certain drummers play or how certain percussionists keep time. We talk about this a lot. There's kind of like two roles that we sort of see Afrocentric percussion in, whether it's either the protagonist in certain roles, which is what we think of in like a rumba ensemble or in the rhythm section in a salsa band, or it's like sort of this auxiliary, which is not to demean its role, but it's sort of a secondary thing when we're talking about drum set-centric music, when we're talking about playing, creative American music, jazz music, when we're talking about playing funk, R&B. Those things, we have to understand that there's a switch that has to flip. We're also a timekeeper, but the primary thing is making sure that the drummer or the drum set lays down the foundation. And then, which we talk about a bunch, in my mind, it's always like, how can I become the drummer's fifth and sixth and seventh? Right? From many standpoints. Sound-wise, what would the drummer play if they had an extra limb? Feel-wise, like is this shaker locking up super hard at the hi-hat? Stuff like that. So
textures.
Are there...
Just learning their vocabulary, I guess.
Yep.
No tienes que become a drummer.
Yep.
But just becoming like comfortable with knowing how drummers play, where they fill spaces, where how they play with the kick, so that way you complement and you not clashing.
Yep.
Fighting with them, basically.
Yeah, of course.
Musically.
When the drummer is in a non-drum set-centric genre, has to do the same thing with the percussion.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ideally, it's always like a very equal thing, right? There's mutual respect and there's mutual experience. Because, there's some percussionists that don't really know how to play well with drummers yet, and vice versa. Some drummers that are like, man, this is my shit, I'm going to fill everything up, and you just like, color some shit.
But some drummers should learn too how to play percussion.
100%, yeah.
So they can understand exactly how, like, hey, you're hitting stuff with your hands. Stuff like that, like how the complexities of it, of playing this.
Yeah, and I feel like all of the best drummers or our heroes have that capability, whether or not they even play. It's like they're able to sort of leave that space. And, also like in an emotional way, not to be like, I'm going to make all the noise, which, it can come a lot of times with the responsibility of a very, if not the most important chair in many senses, which a drummer, a great drummer can make a band great and a shitty drummer can destroy a band. That's like more than any other instrument, I think, on a bandstand.
Indeed.
What you said earlier about drummers, I don't know how many drummers we get as viewers, but a good drummer can give the percussionist more weight if they decide to go along with what the percussionist is trying to bring. Because sometimes maybe the percussionist doesn't have as much experience as a good drummer, and the drummer can decide that I can make your time sound better. And playing with good people is always going to make you sound better, but taking those moments to really soak up that knowledge of someone's groove, someone that locks really hard. If you get to play with that every once in a while, make sure you're really taking that home with you. What does good groove feel like? It's not every day we get to play with it. And soaking that up when you get a chance to play with it is important. So going to see people live.
Going out to see live music and sort of, trying to be in a place where maybe you're not always the best musician on stage is where we really learn exponentially. When you're the least experienced. You have to have the experience to get not all, right? But at least, you got to know when you're in a place where you can really latch onto and learn in an exponential manner. That goes in line with like hopefully getting to not only listen to and study your, colleagues, idols, and heroes, but hopefully getting to work with them. And always, knowing that sort of apprenticeship thing is a huge part of music that's a little bit lost nowadays.
It's been lost.
A lot of the older guys have passed, and we don't always have all the opportunities we used to. Even when we were coming up, it was getting thin, but now it's like really thin.
People are more accessible these days. Como que tú le puedes escribir en Instagram a tu héroe.
Yeah.
And maybe he'll answer if he doesn't end in that folder where a bunch of messages and we find out years later. But the information is there.
Yeah.
And if it's worth it, you can find them. It's a balance of searching for it and that generation and our generation being able to open the door and say like, hey, we're able to share the information as long as you're like disciplined enough.
Right.
And
Yeah, and
care
willing
about
to
the-
receive it. Yeah.
And willing to receive it and care about the culture, about the instruments and that
Yeah.
stuff.
Being present counts for a lot, like in the spot, like the willingness to drive 5 hours to go see your hero
Sure,
play
man.
Which we
is
did.
a little
Yeah, of course.
it gets a little lost because like you say, the accessibility is there, so you think, okay,
Right.
I'm not going to go see the show, I'll wait to see it on Instagram
Yeah.
later or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some newer guys are losing out on. It's not the first time you meet your hero, it's the fifth and sixth time.
Sure.
It's when they get used to seeing you, and yeah, you might have said something dumb the first time, or the
Right.
second and third time you rub somebody the wrong way. If you continue to be there, being persistent is going to make up for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Sure.
And if your heroes see you consistently there, they're going to respect that.
That's kind of the favorable balance. What I kind of lean towards when I mentioned that apprenticeship is kind of getting lost is the opportunity to work with your heroes, like was much more common
Yeah.
60 years ago, just because of the state of the industry. I mean,
Right.
just because like there's less gigs, some folks have passed away. The live music isn't maybe on a local level isn't as prominent as it used to be. So those experiences or those opportunities to play alongside our heroes are like a little bit less and less. But to our credit, we do have the accessibility to be able to like hit people up or just like Google and see where they're playing. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Which is like seems such a trivial thing, but think about like running through a magazine or like trying to like get a line on when is this person coming into town? And now it's very easy to kind of to sort of let that go by the wayside because it's so accessible.
I think that's why there's such a disparity between talented young musicians and not so talented young musicians.
Yeah.
We're seeing, I mean, the wage wealth gap is an equivalent of the talent gap we're seeing.
How they
in,
connect.
in
Yeah,
musicians.
yeah. I mean, it's also because again, like the good side and the dark side of the accessibility is that if you're someone who's coming up and you don't really have a strong foundation, you get flooded with information.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to sift through. For people that are kind of on their way, it's amazing because you can learn literally anything. In terms of specific experiences, do you feel like either of you? Well, let's start with Kilo. Have had that. Kind of brought these things to light, whether it was like, oh man, thank God I really worked with a metronome for the last 10 years, or whether it was like, whoa, I really need to, focus on this.
The first thing that comes to mind for sure is my experiences playing with Quiñones. Luckily, he knew he could push me as far as he wanted to because we had that comfort already.
Rapport. Yeah.
And he felt confident that I wouldn't get upset at him or take it the wrong way. But him not quitting on me, locking in with him as much as he wanted to, because he holds people to a high standard. And I've heard anecdotes from both sides that some it's too much for some people,
Sure.
and it's personally too much. It's not musically too much.
Yes.
And if you're willing to not let your personality or your ego get in the way, you could really learn something from it. And another person that comes to mind, George Delgado, every time he sees me, he has something to say about my technique. And if I was younger, if I was maybe someone who took those things more personal, I wouldn't realize the gems. Like the variations, the things that, I see you're doing this nice, but if you did this, when the tempos get faster, one thing in specific, he told me if it's getting really fast, playing the baqueteo, don't give up on playing your technique the way you want to. Just loosen up some fingers or only play with the two middle fingers because this is easier than this. Yeah, this sounds better, but this is easier to do. And little things like that at first...
Mañita.
Yeah.
Claro,
He
experience.
calls those little master... he has like a
term for
a
it?
term for
Yeah.
it, yeah.
Nice.
And little things about, again, the left hand or how to transition between drums or how to come back from the tumbadora, that you don't get that information most places.
Right.
But you have to be open and you have to prove to these people that you're not going to be sensitive about taking it the wrong way. That takes a while.
For sure.
But being open to that information and staying present, because it wasn't the 10th time with George. It took a lot of times before developing that rapport.
Right. Before he was comfortable too, probably sharing that with you.
Yeah.
Of course. Lopez, I'm sure you have a host of stories coming up in La Cuna
No,
of
bro.
this shit.
Like I'm trying to think like the most valuable lessons have been where I'm like the most uncomfortable.
100%. I can.
Where it's not, for me, fortunately and unfortunately, it's like for years it was salsa.
Sure.
Like como que
Yeah, the school.
the school was salsa. I got good at it, whatever,
Yeah.
and it worked out. I built a career out of it. Pero the other, I always was searching for the other things outside of salsa.
Yeah.
Like learning other worlds, other cultures, like, and the ability to throw myself into those opportunities with an open mind and not just saying no because I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's like my main.
There's like a fine line there in the sense that like obviously you're aware of your abilities. Like if somebody calls you to subverse Zakir Hussein, I'm not taking the gig.
I'm not gonna do that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Let's just be clear on that. I mean, let's all be realistic about, you know what I'm saying? Like we're talking about more of like in a group setting where you're in like, you know, genres or situations that you might, you know, you have the capabilities instrument wise, but maybe it's not the exact language that you're comfortable playing.
Like the Angelique stuff.
Yeah,
or like,
man, I'm right there with you, bro.
Or
Yeah.
or doing like pop stuff that it's not like normal or classical music. Or mixing those worlds and stuff like that.
I mean, the good thing is that you have the foundation in many regards. Maybe you're not a master of like the timpani or something, but you have enough, you know, musical foundation that you can get away with it. Yeah, in a certain setting. That's like, man, you know what? Again, maybe not the Zakir example, but like in most other cases, take the gig, do the homework, give it your best shot, and then at worst case, it's a barometer for you. You're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't, you know, take the gig on, you know, whatever glockenspiel. Okay, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Maybe I need to work on this before I, you know. But it's always good to have that balance of like, yeah, say yes, commit, give it your all, and then you kind of can gauge, you know, if it was a good decision or a bad decision. You know.
And in the end, it wouldn't keep you in a box.
Right.
Yeah.
You will be working hopefully for the rest of your life if you open those doors and just not keep learning, just concentrate. Quiero ser rumbero. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Rumba, I love that.
You don't know what's gonna light you up either.
There's
sometimes other genres playing in other groups really lights you up, and you're like, yo, this is the sort of energy that'll make me practice 3 hours.
Yeah.
Still.
No, and I understand if it feeds your soul. Which there's some music for us that does that.
Yeah. But I mean, being open to new stuff that might feed your soul as much as the old stuff is a nice experience. And sometimes we don't realize that there's still other musics out there that will make you feel that.
For sure. I think also in Lopez's experience, I mean, you were like a really well-known child prodigy timbalero, so of course you get typecasted. Right. That's just part of the, like, that's like it comes with the crown, you know, or whatever you want to call it. Como, this dude does this, call him for that. No, that's just that. I want that. And
I always fight at that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's just a time thing, right? Like, obviously in Puerto Rico, it's easy to work and have a career doing that. Easy is the wrong word, but it's more, más factible, it's a little bit more accessible than trying to do that only when you live in a place like New York. Yeah. Not only because less gigs, smaller industry in that regard, blah, blah, but also because you're shutting yourself off from like this whole other world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's
beauty. There's so much beauty in different cultures.
Absolutely,
and different
man.
Musically, and just the fact that music connects with people and food and art and life, especially here.
I think most people that are lucky enough to live in or near a metropolitan city, you know, whether it's like growing up in CT, I didn't grow up too far from New York. Boston, you have that, you have that.
Boston,
you get that sort of that chance to wet your feet in so many other things, or wet your beak in so many other things. For me, I mean, you know, we all have a lot of stories. I can, in terms of my formative years, which I'm still in, but the earlier formative years, I would say that one thing was definitely getting to play a lot with Marquito when I was first coming up, because I was, you know, most of y'all that know the lowdown, I'm kind of a late bloomer in that regard. I started playing music seriously a little bit later in life. I was fortunate enough that as a result of that and just being around music, I had certain tendencies that helped me out and certain things that didn't work so much in my favor.
Tú tenías el oído. Your ear was trained even like a little kid. So you had that advantage.
You're just around it, so you kind of, you know, you have that sort of, that advantage in that regard. But as far as like experience playing the instrument, definitely like being around somebody that was already like a young master, even though maybe he wasn't as open as he is now to tutelage and sharing information.
I used to sit there and beat him no, you're gonna answer my questions.
And I'm sure this happened with you at some point too. Is that like, you know, I came from so far behind and had to, you know, run so hard to even like remotely catch up. Not that I ever caught up, but at least I got closer. At some point, I was able to just absorb Marcos' stuff, even if he wasn't so willing to share. I'm talking about, this is like, you know, we were kids.
We played together so much.
So much, man.
Yeah. Y igual de acá también, cosas que compartíamos.
You know, but it's interesting because that sort of bled into when I first started, you know, my first kind of big gig or whatever. Luckily, alongside another 19-year-old that started playing the same month as me, was with Paquito. And, you know, this Alex Brown, another great pianist, who again was much more prepared at the time in many regards than I was.
Like classically trained.
Yeah. And like, you know, already very much a young master. But for me, it was the idea that I was once I got over like the little bit of like innate fear that came along with being the youngest guy by, decades on a gig, it was that idea that I was like, oh man, I can learn exponentially here because I'm so much worse in every, every aspect of being a musician than everybody else that's even, close to this stage. And I think that goes along with like, being comfortable with the unknown in some regards, which is something that we all have to do, especially when we play creative music. But in general, anytime we take a gig where we're not, we don't know everybody or don't know the music by heart, this idea of like being comfortable in that unknown.
It's the fun part.
Yeah, that's the
now. But I choose which gigs.
Yeah. There's a whole other component to that. But to touch on what Kilo said is like being open to the input of others and also being open to being that vulnerable in a situation where like, man, I might not be, at the place I want to be with certain things, but if you're getting a call, it's for a reason. So even if it's the wrong reason or a mistake, they'll figure that out on the way. And, make the most of the experience, make the most of the opportunity, learn as much as you can. I think that's a huge, like, being comfortable or getting to a place where you feel little by little more comfortable with the unknown is, like, an indispensable thing as a musician in general. I mean, in life in general, but especially if you're, like, constantly playing with people that are at all different levels and you're playing different music. It's like you're getting thrown into a different scenario every time you take a gig. And that's something that I think definitely goes in hand and will impact you musically and as a person. Not only do we mean being comfortable, like, bring my best sort of, demeanor to this gig, which is super important, but
being
also
flexible is very important.
And that's always going to like go back and forth in the musical sense and in like a personal sense. Like all of those things bleed into each other. What Lopez said is super important because I think understanding that, actually Kilo mentioned this too, there's always going to be things that like really pull at your heartstrings musically, right? There's always going to be like, man, I really like love playing rumba. Of course, it's something that completely feeds you in a way that maybe other genres do or don't. But the idea of at least trying to carry that sort of passion and desire to any musical setting is something that like I had to work on. I mean, we all have to like, man, it's like, we talk about this all the time. It's like, if you can play with the same conviction when you're playing like, when you're like shedding your Giovanni shit or whatever, that you approach playing a shaker with or a triangle with. It's like that conviction, that's the key. Like aside from honing the skills and all that, like that sort of, esa entrega, that thing of like, having the security of it and just like finding the joy in like the smallest thing is what really, like I really notice it a lot in, the masters that I really, in every instrument, every regard. And that can be something as simple as like you notice their commitment to playing with a ridiculous pocket and taste. I think that conviction is something that like all of the greats really, you took the gig and so now it's like, okay, we have the musical part of it, but it's also like the la parte del oficio. Like I'm going to put my best foot forward.
Respect.
Yep. And whatever I play, however meaningful or whatever, whoever deems that, try to bring that idea of the conviction and the sort of passion no matter what we play. Yeah. And I'm sure we all have experiences where we've had to really, really hone into that. For me, I'll tell you like a quick thing like that I always lean on that we talk about. The idea of like playing in a drum set-centric setting, really like, I don't just say that shit lightly like, oh, I'm trying to be the drummer just in six limbs. Like that just sounds like rhetoric. No, I'm like so hyper-focused, especially when playing with a new drummer, is to like, all right, what's the feel like? How is their balance? Like some silly things like I always like try to choose a shaker that really complements the hi-hat, how it sounds in moments where I want it to sound uniform, and choose a shaker that maybe complements and sounds very different in times where I'm like, oh, I want the shaker to cut a little bit. And always being like, that's something I super hyper focus on. And in the Ricky gig, it's hard because Tony's 1,000 feet away. Yeah. But like, I'm always really like, man, I want to make sure that like my shaker feels like it's attached to the hi-hat or attached to his stick. Like the feel is like super locked in.
I have a question. Why do people like the pros, like the guys that do records and stuff,
the guys they call.
Like they just don't bring one shaker to the gig.
Right.
There's like 7 shakers, different textures that that will fill up the space. That same pattern, but it's gonna fill it up in different layers that it's gonna complement. Like percussionists don't think about how the guitar, when that texture,
for sure,
that which type of strings, like it connects with that your choices musically and texture wise.
Genres really sort of are the guiding light in that regard. Like they influence a lot the style of music you're playing. When I think of like stuff like if you think of like some 70s Javan records where like obviously there's a lot of components. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but like besides the fact that everything's super warm and crunchy and like on the mix side, it's also like understanding that, oh, how do I want this to fit? Do I want it to be seamless? Do I want it to really stick out in a place where it needs to protagonize a little more? And I feel like, yeah, I'm sure, any guy that does a lot of session work, probably you get even more experience with that because you get to hyper focus on the specific sound.
Yeah.
It's also just like the kind of thing where like it's something we learned on the go. You know what I mean? Like it's not, you gotta make sure you're open to it. And I think another like super, and I'm sure I'm gonna ask you guys for these little tips too, because I think they're kind of like they're coming to my mind right now. That I learned like on playing on a pop gig is like, for example, again, focusing on the feel. Like when I would pick up a tambourine, the same thing. Like there's so many ways, just like with a shaker, you can play with no accents, you can play accessing a certain beat, you can play heavy on 2 and 4, you can play heavy on 1 and 3. All those things pertaining to the style and specifically the drummer. Yeah. And something that I wasn't super aware of, I mean, up until like, kind of playing through a few songs is like, I almost like by default, I don't even think about it anymore. Whenever I'm like playing tambourine in a certain section, I'm programmed to like only keep time in the 4th, 8th, or 16th bar. Yeah. Like, it's just like this idea of like, there's a good chance this drummer's going to play a fill. Yeah. Yes, he might crack the backbeat with me, but like, why risk it? That's like programming to me.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Too, yeah.
I'll just ride the last bar. Like, it's all good. I'm not taking away from anything, and I'm making sure that there's no way I'm going to clash if I'm just riding time without hitting an accent. And it's something silly that I never really thought about until I started playing more and more pop music live specifically. It's like, I'm going to be really aware of that. It could be a 3-bar phrase, whatever, of that. The end of the form, which is something that we haven't really talked about, learning the music, which is something super important. You know what I mean? But like in a drum set-centric setting, it's like being aware that like there's tendencies. Most drummers are going to fill because that's their fucking job to take us to the next section and that, you know what I mean? And being aware of that.
You touched on something that I'd just like to put another spotlight on, that when you're playing bigger stages, it's important to take less risks. It's especially when you're far from the other guys you're playing with. When you're close together, when you're in the studio, there's a lot of fun ways to interact with the other musicians. But it's been my experience that if you're playing with in-ears, you have your mix as well as you can have it. It's always best to do things like that, to make sure you're not getting in the drummer's way, to make sure you're not trying to interplay too much. Maybe you know that drummer well, in another setting you would, but in this setting, it's a lot better to just not clash. You don't know how loud the guy has you in front. You don't know what the mix is like in front. So you want to be a little safer than you would.
I think that's a huge thing to keep in mind to compensate for like the energy. Because like obviously like in a studio, I mean, sure, we all strive to be Marquito and play everything in one take. Great. But in reality, there's probably going to be things that get punched and things you can clean up as you develop the structure and your desire of what you want to express on a tune. That's not the case when playing live. And knowing that energy is always going to be a component, whether it's like, you're hyped to play or you had like one too many Red Bulls. There's that tendency to like, let your emotions get the best of you. And using that as a starting point is great because you're like, all right, there's going to be times where, I'm going to express things in a way that maybe my emotions carry me that's not necessarily super ideal in that exact moment. And that's live music.
Right.
But having the bed of like, all right, we're going to start here. So that when there are these fluctuations, it's, you know what I mean? It doesn't feel like I'm constantly overplaying all the time.
No, it's learn drums. At least you don't have to like play drums like Dini, but just learn a little bit to understand the nuances of it.
Yep. Learn about the role of the drums.
The role of the drums, like how in certain genres, how they kick, it may be louder than the snare. Tuning, balance. Just so you can, as a percussionist, then later on
apply those things.
Yeah. And genres.
Yeah. That's something that's like, it's so crazy because this is going to maybe sound, this might rub some folks the wrong way. But, because in my narrow-minded life and approach to the universe, I think that it's super important to have an idea and understanding of the tradition of an instrument. But once you're playing in non-traditional settings, it's equally important to feel comfortable manipulating that, stretching that, forgetting about it. Of course, good technique and sound and feel always the focal point, but being okay with finding ways that, specifically congas, which are some of the most universal drums you're going to find in genres across the world for the past 60 years, being cool with kind of understanding when those things can be adapted for the benefit of the music, whether it's a groove, whether it's playing no ghost tones, whether it's like never playing a slap, whatever it is that that helps fit the genre. I think that's something that when we come from a strong tradition, it can. There's definitely like I've seen it. I mean, it happened to me. It happens to a lot of folks that don't have that experience, where you're like, okay, I have to, there's a little bit of friction between like I'm trying to play, with respect to the instrument, but I also like need to worry about the music first and foremost, right? Because it's
right.
It's most important.
Yeah, and like a lot of my favorite conga players and percussionists that sort of were able to live in both those worlds were really adept at doing that. Don Elias comes to mind,
right?
Luis Conte, guys that like really understand like and put the time in to learn the tradition, but like know when to be like, yeah, this maybe is not the time for all that. You know what I mean? So,
but Don was a killing drummer too.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I mean, Don has information, but like people sleep on his conga playing, bro.
Oh my god.
Like,
Taste.
bro, sound, language,
taste,
like it's one of the. Yeah, I think I posted it like a while back. Like one of the most beautiful, tasteful open solos. I mean, like
The
Johnny.
killing, bro. And like, and then there's another. Yeah, he's just bad, bro. And like. You can tell he really checked out just from the sound. You know that he studied.
Like he can see that he was checking out the real stuff.
Yeah, he was
while he was doing the other.
He was in proximity to it.
Exactly.
Lenny Castro, man.
Yeah,
Lenny Castro. Studying the guys that have done it. They created a new language.
Yeah.
Knowing what Santana's guys from the 70s sounded like, or the original guys in the late 60s, knowing this language, if I'm playing a Santana song, it has to sound like that.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to play a full tumbao and I want it to sound killing.
Yeah, it doesn't work. Secondary.
That's not. It's just like sometimes you got to play the wawanko on the other side.
Sure.
Because that's the way the tune calls for.
Melody.
Knowing that if I'm playing this tune, if I'm playing boogaloo, no matter how much I want to play like me, you gotta maybe play a little less left hand.
Yeah.
Right?
Respect the style. Yeah, same goes for all other genres that, again, my favorite players always have at least an idea or grasp of the tradition, but are fully willing to sacrifice it in service of the music. Bobby Hall comes to mind on all those amazing Motown recordings and Stevie and stuff. Like, that's like, you can tell it's someone, they have a sound on the instrument. You don't just get a sound from hitting the instrument once, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's something that you work on. So the fact that they have that, you already understand that they're like, coming from a good notion of the tradition, but they're completely willing to break away from it so that the music sounds great. And that's like, for me, that's like priority number one. Like, take all the shit that and throw out the window if you have to make that shit feel good. You know what I mean? That's like, at the end of the day, bro, that's what it comes down to.
Best example, who's recorded more albums than Marquito and Luisito Quintero? But we've both seen them sacrifice their tumbao, sacrifice whatever, make it sound less Latino, more American. And they do it all the time.
That's super important, The purpose of, starting this sort of video podcast, dialogue is to share our experiences, of course, but also to understand the struggles, beautiful moments, experiences, roadblocks that we've all, come across, but also you folks that are listening out there. So please feel free to let us know all of your hot takes on everything we talked about, the things you dig, the things you agree with, disagree with.
Preguntitas.
Yeah, questions you have, anything you want to kind of have us, cover as, we start to build this this sort of community dialogue here. I think it's something that we all have always done it behind closed doors, right? Like we've been talking shop, for the last 20 years, talking all kinds of bullshit.
It's needed during these times to connect, especially since music is the biggest connector of all.
We're replicating a lot of the conversations that we had at venues, watching our heroes or watching each other play, the conversations that we're having in between sets.
Yeah, and also like the the Berkeley years that we'll dive into later, were a lot of listening and talking and and listen to so many records and talk so much shit.
I used to come basically with the mic. What are you listening to?
Yeah.
What are you listening to and why?
Make playlists off the shit that we would check out. Part 2, we're going to talk about the next aspect after honing your skills. What are the next things to worry about when we're talking about getting those gigs? Continuing on this journey from the mindset of things that can help folks that are beginners all the way to folks that already have long-standing gigs. Things that we just kind of converse about and have some ideas and opinions on. So. I guess we'll see you guys.
We feel some kind of way.
We'll see you guys next time. Beautiful.